In 2006, Juventus Football Club were the best team in all of Italy, an unstoppable force that steamrolled everyone in their way and left no room for debate. Sadly, this aura of dominance was proven to be too good to be true. In the same year, this great club were named, shamed, and unveiled to the world as possibly the worst thing that an organization of any kind can be labeled as: cheaters. For their efforts, they were expelled from top-level football. However, only 6 years later, the resilience of the old lady proved to be too strong for all that doubted them. Antonio Conte, manager supreme, melting pot of fury, leader of men, was the driving catalyst. The resurgence of Juventus following the most difficult period in the club's history is a marvel of fighting spirit. Not only did they return to the top, but under Conte, the team became statistically the single strongest team to ever grace Serie A. In his first season, the man did not lose a single game. In his third and final season, he acquired more points than any club in the land ever had and ever has: 102. Having said that, as is customary with one of football's most fiery personalities, when all was said and done, words were exchanged, bridges were burned, even more match manipulation was indirectly uncovered, and the world was left dazed and confused at how all of this, everything, came to be. So, just how did all of this happen? This is the story of Antonio Conte's Juventus, an invincible machine resurrected from the dead. We start this story off in court. It's the summer of 2006, and Italy are on top of the world. Literally. Having just won the World Cup in Berlin, it was a good time to be Italian, even more so a Juventus supporter. 8 Juventus players made their way to the pitch in the World Cup final, 5 for Italy and 3 for France. This overwhelming representation was for good reason too. I Bianconeri of Turin had just clinched back-to-back Serie A titles against a formidable Carlo Ancelotti-led Milan. Life couldn't get any better. But even as Azzurri celebrations echoed, a case that had been bubbling and building back home for years was ripe and primed to change the landscape of Italian football forever. The scandal was named Calciopoli, directly translated to Footballgate, a play on words referencing the Watergate scandal that ended the United States presidency of Richard Nixon back in 1974. Now, that scandal involved the accused planting listening devices and lifting documents belonging to their opponents to influence the presidency. At a high level, Calciopoli was a massive match manipulation scandal uncovered in May of '06, and similar to Watergate, wiretaps, conversation transcripts, and sensitive documents were implemented. However, in the case of Calciopoli, they would be used to orchestrate the undoing of a fair number of high-profile wrongdoers. Investigators had wiretapped phone calls of top Italian officials, initially as part of an investigation into doping, but what they found was turned into an unprecedented fiasco. Top clubs, including Juventus, Fiorentina, Lazio, AC Milan, and more, were influencing the officiating of matches to tilt them in their favor. I recently made an episode on Carlo Ancelotti's AC Milan where I touched on the subject, but the scandal ran far deeper than what I described in that episode. The officials in charge of scheduling matches and selecting referees were being influenced to postpone certain matches to certain days and/or select referees that were either in favor or not in favor of certain teams. This was so there was a higher likelihood of 50-50s, cards, penalty decisions, and more going the way of one of the teams. So in many cases, the referees themselves weren't actually involved, directly at least. Certain refs were even demoted if they weren't deemed to be biased enough, which prompted others to comply and be biased in fear of jeopardizing their careers. Luciano Moggi, Juventus's general manager and one of the most powerful men in Italian football at the time, was at the scandal center. To provide one example of how the propositioning worked, I'm going to read a direct quote extracted from Football Italia, Italian Football in an Age of Globalization, written by Mark Dowidge. The book details the context of Italian football at the turn of the century. Quote, Moggi's position at Juventus granted him access to the resources of Fiat. As Juventus was owned by the car giant, Moggi could access staff discounts on Fiat cars. He could then provide these discounts of between 23 and 50% to acquiescent referees. End quote. So basically, somewhere out there, a high-ranking Italian football official was, maybe even still is, riding around in a Fiat 500 for stealing the league. Shameful. Doge also goes on to state that gift-giving was a very common practice in Italian football, so much so that former Roma president Franco Sensi was openly known to gift referees expensive Rolex watches in 2000. Very interestingly, Roma won Serie A in 2001. Quote, Moggi was operating no differently. His gifts were simply worth more. End quote. Juventus, the reigning champions of the previous 2 years, faced heavy punishment. In July 2006, they were stripped of their 2005 and 2006 Serie A titles and relegated to Serie B for the first time in their history. The 2005 title was left unassigned, and the 2006 Scudetto was handed controversially to rivals Inter Milan, who themselves were also implicated to some degree in the whole fiasco but went unpunished. Several charges and bans were dished out to referees and key club figures from multiple teams. Many charges were eventually written off due to the statute of limitations. However, many bans remained in place. As for Juve, the punishment didn't just end there. Initially, sporting tribunals slapped a 30-point handicap for the coming Serie B season, virtually condemning them to 2 years in the second tier. Naturally, in the wake of all of this, Juventus went through a bit of a shift in their board personnel, and incoming Juve chairman Giovanni Coboli was quick to comment on how he felt about this deduction. The 30-point deduction is not acceptable. It is a disgrace. We were expecting a more balanced verdict. We were wrong to trust these judges. Juventus will appeal against this verdict. We want to safeguard our fans and our small shareholders. End quote. Interesting take. For the most part, it seems that none of the actual players and managers were involved, but at the end of the day, Juventus's name was scarred, and on a broader perspective, Italian football's credibility was in tatters. Trust in Italian officiating hit an all-time low. Dozens of players fled the country for more stable and, quite frankly, more lucrative leagues. Several sponsors decided to pool their resources in the scandal's wake. The days of Italy being football's financial powerhouse of the world around the 80s and 90s were already long gone, and it's heavily believed that this fiasco ensured they would not be back anytime soon, if ever. What should have been a golden era after Italy's World Cup victory turned into a nightmare. The exodus began. Fabio Cannavaro, Lilian Thuram, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Gianluca Zambrotta, Patrick Vieira, Emerson Ferreira all jumped ship, many to direct rivals. It was open season on Juve's squad as Europe's elite cherry-picked their talent. Yet, amid the turmoil, a core of loyal players refused to abandon the sinking ship. Club legend Alessandro Del Piero stayed, so did Gianluigi Buffon, Mauro Camoranesi, Pavel Nedved, David Trezeguet, and a young Giorgio Chiellini. If you believe the rumor mill, Del Piero in particular was subject to a lucrative offer from Manchester United, but his commitment was never questioned. When asked why he didn't leave, he simply said, quote, "A true gentleman never leaves his lady," end quote. The textbook definition of loyalty. The initial 30-point deduction was reduced to 9 points, more manageable, but even still, the second division was uncharted territory. Smaller stadiums, modest opponents, and Juve's mere presence definitely made a bit of a spectacle. Away grounds filled up to catch a glimpse of the stripped Italian champions. I don't think it can be overstated just how surreal this situation was. Imagine Barcelona were found to be cheaters in 2025, and the new Camp Nou hosted Segunda Division matches for the first team. Financially, the club obviously took a hit, but support never wavered. Didier Deschamps returned to his former club and embraced the challenge of leading them back to glory as the manager. The first Serie B match ended in a bit of a hiccup, a 1-1 draw to Rimini on Italy's Adriatic coast. but that was all it was, a hiccup. Which is hardly surprising. At the end of the day, even if they lost many of their stars, they were still technically the reigning champions of Italy. The quality gap was extremely visible. Del Piero led by example, scoring goal after goal. He finished as Serie B's top scorer with 20 goals that year. On May 19, 2007, Juventus secured their return to Serie A, beating Arezzo 5-1. They finished first with 85 points despite that 9-point deduction. As was expected, after 1 year, Juve had returned. Back where they belonged, Juventus now faced the task of rebuilding from ruin. The club's new management emphasized the need for patience from the support, but not under Deschamps, as he and the board failed to agree on their respective visions for the club. He resigned the day Juventus were confirmed as being promoted back. So, in came Claudio Ranieri. In their first season back, Juve surprised many and more or less picked up where they left off. Third place in 07-08, a remarkable comeback for the newly promoted side. The team were playing with a point to prove. Del Piero even won the Serie A Golden Boot in 2008 at age 33 with 21 goals. David Trezeguet was right behind him at 30 years old with 20. Rising stars joined the team. Claudio Marchisio and Sebastian Giovinco, both Turin natives and long-term Juventus Academy prospects, joined the fold. These two had joined the club at 7 and 8 respectively and were exactly the kind of player and personality needed to push them forward. Juventus were also back in the Champions League and even beat Real Madrid twice in 08-09 in the group stages, including a famous night at the Bernabeu where Del Piero received a standing ovation after scoring both goals of the night in a 2-0 win. It was almost like they never left. In that year, Ranieri's men improved to second place in Serie A behind only Inter Milan. It felt like the resurrection was ahead of schedule. But, the reason it felt like that is because, well, it was. Underneath the progress, it seems that most of the doubters were warranted. The team was overperforming and would soon be brought back down to earth. In May 2009, with 2 games remaining, Juventus sacked Ranieri amid a dip in form. Ironically, they weren't all that patient. And to be entirely fair, this was after Juve went on a 7-game winless streak from matchday 30 to 36. 6 draws and a loss, only to lose the title by 10 points. A wide margin, sure, but made to look more cumbersome due to that late sloppiness. A magnificent return to glory was within touching distance, but it just wasn't meant to be. And the next 2 years would bring even more turmoil. 2 consecutive 7th place finishes in 2010 and 2011. Managerial instability was a major culprit. 3 managers came in and went. The 09-10 campaign was a disaster. Juventus crashed out of the Champions League in the group stages and then were knocked out of the Europa League by Fulham in the round of 16 after winning the first leg 3-1. Turin-based newspaper Tuttosport did not pull any punches with their response to this. Director and chief editor Paolo De Paula had this to say, quote, "You should be ashamed. Those who have failed must pay. This is the last station, the end of the line. Juventus's year has been a total flop in which the ownership, club, and team are all implicated. All of them. Reacting to the situation and working to find the solution is now obligatory. The ship is full of leaks. Every sector needs to be looked at because in everyone there is dysfunction and holes." End quote. It's a bit dramatic, but he had a point. In the same period, new stars were signed for big money only for none of them to really make an impact. For example, 50 million euros for Brazilians Diego and Filippo Melo failed to move the needle. The squad felt like a mismatched puzzle of fading veterans and underperforming imports. Meanwhile, locker room morale suffered. The team lacked unity and fighting spirit. By 2011, fans were restless and disillusioned. Chants of "Rivogliamo la Juve," "We want our Juve back," echoed in the Stadio Olimpico. They were stuck. Juve needed not just a tactical overhaul, but an identity restoration. Now, Juventus, like most clubs of their stature, and there really aren't that many out there, have always had a bit of a soft spot for former players and inviting them back for the hot seat. It makes sense. To become part of the Juve family, one requires a special kind of edge. In the midst of this stagnation, a clear solution began to emerge in the minds of many: Antonio Conte. The prevailing sentiment was that the club needed a figure who embodied its grinta, or grit. Having spent the vast majority of his career at Juventus with over 400 appearances in one of its most successful periods ever, arguably its most successful from a continental perspective, Conte knew what the good times felt like at Juve. He was a hard-working midfielder who captained the club in the late 1990s. Wasn't the flashiest player, but he was all heart. During 13 seasons in Turin, Conte lifted every trophy on offer, including the 1996 Champions League. Despite reaching the final 5 times since, at the time of this recording, this remains the last European title that the club has won. Even further, Conte retired from football in 2004 as a Juve player, only a year before the Calciopoli scandal is believed to have been in full force. As he transitioned into coaching, he had to watch on as his former club fell deeper and deeper into the abyss. As a manager though, he definitely earned his bones. First came Arezzo in Serie B in 2006-07. It what turned out to be a wacky first year. He was sacked by October and replaced by Maurizio Sarri, who was sacked in March. Conte then came back in March and led the team to relegation to Serie C. To be fair, the club saw an uptick when he came back, but it just wasn't enough. Next was Bari in 2007, also in Serie B. An incredible success. Promotion to Serie A in 2009, which led him to Atalanta. Now this one may not have been the move. It was a disaster from the start, and the club was essentially fighting relegation all season. By November, fan protests were increasingly growing rowdy. By January, the Ultras had seen enough. After 19 games, they had only won 3 and were 2 points from the bottom. In a 2-0 home defeat to Napoli, the crowd were incensed, hurling words at the team and manager during the game. Every attempt by the players to engage was met with fury, and in the wake of the loss, a crowd is formed at the stadium exit to further confront the players as they start their journeys home. As per an account of the situation in local paper Bergamo News, when Conte comes into contact with the mob, things got so heated that multiple policemen had to step in and intervene to hold him back. Yes, you heard that right, hold Conte back. Go back to Turin, we're not at Juventus here, is heard from the crowd, and Conte, seeing red at this point, offers a rebuttal. If I don't suit you, I'll leave. Well, true to his word, the very next day he handed in his resignation letter. He left the club in 19th place and, Atalanta only managed to climb up one more spot, but were still relegated. Oof. So basically, of the man's first 3 teams managed, he's gotten 2 relegated and 1 promoted. So it's an odd CV. In the modern football landscape, Antonio Conte is a bit of an enigma. He comes across as extremely headstrong and filled with, to put it lightly, passion and uncompromising intensity. His ideas, while perhaps not so effective in Bergamo, were evident to anyone paying attention, and those ideas reflected his personality, aggression, organization, discipline, and rapid adaptability, which is why clubs were still more than willing to throw chances his way. And so, next came Siena the next year, and things were far more pleasant here. He led the Serie B side to promotion in his one and only season there. 2 promotions and 2 relegations? Sounds like a balanced spreadsheet to me, which is probably why his former home had seen enough. The call from Juventus in 2011 was not just a job offer, it was a summons to restore a fallen empire. The appointment was made official on May 31, 2011. Club president Andrea Agnelli let the world know how he felt about this acquisition. Quote, "We want to succeed, and we want to do it with Antonio Conte. He is the first piece in the jigsaw to return to winning ways." End quote. But I doubt that even he had an inkling of what was to come. Juve were about to go Antonio Conte's arrival in summer 2011 coincided with a lot of change that would overhaul Juventus's fortunes almost overnight. The club moved into the brand new Juventus Stadium in September of 2011, a modern, intimate 41,000-seat arena built on the site of the old stadium. It was more than just a new home, it symbolized a fresh start. Crucially, Juventus's management delivered smart signings after years of misfires in the transfer market. This time, they hit big. Arturo Vidal, a tireless, dynamic Chilean midfielder, signed from Leverkusen for 10.5 million. Stefan Lichtsteiner, a Swiss no-nonsense right-back from Lazio, 10 million. Mirko Vucinic, a crafty, versatile forward from Roma, 15 million. And then, one of the greatest signings in world football since the turn of the century. A man thought to be past his prime, but was still very much in it. Andrea Pirlo, the world-class playmaker extraordinaire. Free from Milan. This was the early 2010s, so money had certainly been flying around in world football. With the backing of Fiat and before the full implementation of FFP, you'd imagine that Juventus always had access to a sizable amount of funds, definitely more so than others in the country, bar one or two. But evidently, they did not need to go that far. Vidal added grit and goals from the midfield. Lichtsteiner brought endless running to the flank. Vucinic added creativity and flair up front. Pirlo was the classic quarterback deep-lying man, and just like that, we had a team on our hands. This is what it looked like. 3 at-the-back formations were Conte's bread and butter, still are. With the right personnel, it gives you everything. Width, narrow compaction, quick transitions, and enough triangles to allow for slow progression if needed. But initially at Juventus, in his first season at least, he favored a back 4 and slowly shifted towards 3 at the back as the season progressed. 4-3-3 and 4-2-3-1 was how it started. 3-5-2 was how it ended. At the back were 23-year-old Leonardo Bonucci and 29-year-old Andrea Barzagli, who both joined a season prior for a combined 16 million euros, 15.5 for Bonucci, 600k for Barzagli. Can you imagine? Rounding off the rotation of centre-backs was 26-year-old Giorgio Chiellini. With the 4 million spent on Chiellini back in 2003, this back 3 costs just shy of 20 million euros all in. All 3 possessed pace not usually reserved for centre-backs, particularly Barzagli, who was absolutely rapid. In the case of Bonucci, we had another player with quarterback-level vision, and Chiellini could pretty much do it all and would often play at left-back as the team searched for a more specialized option. And behind them sat the great Gianluigi Buffon. That's what you call magic. At right-back or right wing-back was Stefan Lichtsteiner. As I already alluded to, the man was a workhorse of note. The midfield department of any Conte team is often my favorite section, and I can confidently say that this preference emerged because of this team. Claudio Marchisio, Arturo Vidal, and Andrea Pirlo. It's hard to put into words just how effective these 3 were at doing what they did. Pirlo was the anchor of Juventus's midfield, orchestrating play from deep with unmatched vision and passing range. He dictated the tempo, maintained possession, and initiated attacks without needing to push forward. Vidal was the engine of the midfield, relentless, aggressive, and always involved at both ends of the pitch. He had a knack for scoring crucial goals, making last-ditch tackles, and his ability to win the ball high ensured Juventus were able to apply constant pressure throughout the 90. And Marchisio provided the tactical glue between Pirlo's creativity and Vidal's intensity. He adapted seamlessly to different roles, covering ground, intercepting passes, and supporting attacks with well-timed runs. Along with Vidal, Marchisio ensured Pirlo was the most protected regista on the planet. In attack were the timeless Del Piero, Simone Pepe, Mirko Vucinic, and Alessandro Matri, all interchanging for the forward roles in whatever setup Conte was implementing on the day. Conte's demanding style was clearly imprinted. The squad played every match at a final-like intensity, often outrunning and outfighting opponents in the dying minutes, and if they didn't, we all had an idea of what was waiting for them in the changing room. On the sideline, Conte was a one-man spectacle. Whether he was celebrating a goal, berating a player, or asking the ref for the time, it was non-stop intensity on his end, and as a result, the new Juventus stadium turned into a fortress. Ditching the running track on the field perimeter and bringing the fans closer to the game was a good idea. And so, in that first season, Conte's side produced a fairy tale. Juventus, recently relegated, named, shamed, won the 2011-12 Serie A title, going the entire run undefeated. 23 wins, 15 draws, 0 losses, 84 points. Their first official league crown since 2003. At so many points, it seems like the Invincible run was not meant to be, and honestly, maybe in another timeline it actually wasn't supposed to. And one reason for me saying this is a direct clash at the San Siro against AC Milan on the 25th of February 2012. A match remembered for Milan's ghost goal. A headed ball by Milan midfielder Suleimantari clearly crossed Juve's goal line, but was not given. The linesman was well placed, but no dice. A strong Milan, the defending champions in fact, were already a goal up, and 2-0 would have made for a steep hill to climb, but the game ended 1-1. A psychological boost that proved to be just enough as Conte's men kept their nerve through to the end. In addition to all of that, testament to Juventus's cohesion, not one of their players even cracked the top 10 scoring charts. And it's not like they weren't scoring. Juve were the second highest scorers in the league, only 6 behind Milan, who had 74. Plus, 3 players in Matri, Vucinic, and Marchisio scored a total of 10 goals over the year each. However, where Juventus truly set themselves apart was in defense. Only 20 goals conceded, 13 less than Milan in second place. The solid wall of Buffon, Barzagli, Bonucci, and Chiellini was unbreakable. This was a team that truly played for each other and shared the load completely in every sense of the pitch. The triumph was sealed on the 6th of May, clinching the Scudetto with a game to spare. As if scripted, Del Piero scored in his final home appearance and got a true hero send-off, wrapping up his iconic story arc and bringing closure to an era. Off the field, the club's revival was evident too. Commercial sponsors flocked back and the fans' faith was fully restored. The old lady were back on top. The boys entered 2012-13 hungry for more and made yet another shrewd signing by snapping up Paul Pogba, an immensely talented one-to-way 19-year-old midfielder from Manchester United, for guess how much? That's right, free. Pogba arrived relatively unknown to many fans in Italy, but Conte saw a gem. Standing at 6'3", Pogba blossomed spectacularly in Turin, filling in everywhere in the midfield, scoring long-range stunners and earning the nickname Il Polpo, the octopus, for his rangy, all-action style. From not being given minutes at Manchester United to getting 37 appearances in his first season for the Italian champions, I'd say he made the correct career move. Joining him was midfielder Kwadwo Asamoah, who was regularly used as either a left fullback or wingback, a great type of player to have, a real Swiss knife. And of course, the most important signing, Nicklas Bendtner, the Lord himself. But things didn't exactly go as planned. This is Juventus we're talking about. In this era, there was always something negative to dissect. So, you're Juventus. You've just gotten yourself back to the top and stuck it to the doubters. Let me ask you, what is quite literally the last thing that you would want to befall the club at this point? Ding ding ding, correct, another match-fixing scandal. Except this time, the club itself wasn't implicated. Arguably worse, it was the manager. In 2012, a new investigation uncovered widespread illegal betting activity across the second and third divisions of Italian football, Serie B and Serie C. The timelines of the scandal overlapped with Conte's time with Siena, another dark period that led to a wave of arrests, suspensions, bans, and more. It sounds familiar, right? At the heart of the matter were gambling syndicates with links to Eastern Europe and Asian betting rings paying for results. Players, staff members, and others were reportedly bribed in some way or another to do anything from intentionally conceding goals, missing tackles, provide insider tips on absences and player injuries not reported to the media. For the most part, the mode of manipulation was much less subtle than calciopoli. And again, wiretaps, leaked messages, and more were used to uncover the conspiracy. Now, onto the man of the hour. Antonio Conte himself was not found to have directly participated in all of this. However, he was deemed to have had knowledge of the match manipulation while it was happening, but chose not to report it, something he has vehemently denied to this day. And what makes this case even more, interesting or confusing is it seems that the only reason that Conte was implicated at all was thanks to the testimony of one of Conte's former Siena players, Filippo Carobio. Carobio claimed that Conte was allegedly present as Siena president Massimo Mezzaroma relayed a message to the team to ensure a particular match ended in a draw. Indeed, the game ended in a draw. Similar accusations were thrown for 2 further games. The issue is that there were 23 other players allegedly present for this meeting, and not one of them backed up Carobio's claims. He also only mentioned Conte's name quite late in the proceedings, with many feeling he only did so to secure a reduced punishment by cooperating with the authorities and incriminating others. No other evidence was found that tied Conte to this scandal, even after several raids of his offices and homes. There were a few other small details in timing, consistency, and motive that has since led many to question this testimony. So, what was it? A case of a disgruntled former employee fibbing to save his own skin? Or perhaps a multi-layered conspiracy where some 23 people or more agreed an oath to secrecy, bar one? But wait, there's more. Even if there wasn't any physical or direct evidence, according to the powers that be, Conte was not deemed to be as innocent as he was leading people on to believe. His assistant coach, Christian Stellini, was found to be much more directly involved in these fixes. He pleaded guilty, was banned from football for 2.5 years, and resigned from Juventus almost immediately. From the optics, it's hard to imagine that Conte didn't know what his right-hand man was up to. The two have remained close too. Stellini has gone on to follow Conte to Inter Milan, Tottenham Hotspur, and Napoli as his assistant in the years after. Wherever the truth lies, for that, and a few other reasons, Conte ultimately received a 4-month ban. The optics, across the board, they weren't great. Drama aside, as the 12-13 season began with Conte confined to a locker room TV or skybox, nothing seemed out of place as the team raced to the top and never looked back. The 3-5-2 was used almost exclusively this time around, with the only notable replacements being Sebastian Giovinco for the now retired Del Piero. By the time Conte returned to the bench in December 2012, Juve still looked unstoppable. Still the best defense in the land with a jaw-dropping midfield. In attack, however, Juve still lacked a prolific scorer. For the second year in a row, a midfielder topped the scoring charts, Arturo Vidal this time with 14 all round. Nonetheless, Juventus clinched a second straight Serie A title in 2012-13, finishing comfortably 9 points ahead of Napoli. By this point, the only thing missing from Juve's resurgence was European glory. However, in their return, they were firmly discarded by eventual champions Bayern Munich, 4-0 on aggregate in the quarterfinal, 2 in Munich, 2 in Turin. The defeat was sobering. Quote, "We played with courage, but learned how much work is left to reach the top level." End quote. Antonio Conte was frustrated. But the frustration would not get in the way of history. The third year, the final year, and what a lethal one it was. This team was, quite possibly, the best team to ever grace Italian football. By the statistics, it definitely is. It has no competition. Most wins in a single season, 33. Most home wins in a single season, 19. That's every home game. Again, the best defense in the league, 23 conceded. And finally, the most insane stat: most points in league history. 102. 102 points. It's actual insanity. In the summer of 2013, the club addressed the long-standing need for firepower up front by signing Carlos Tevez from Manchester City, 9 million, and Fernando Llorente from Athletic Club for the magic number, 0. These two provided exactly what many thought was missing. Tevez's tenacity and Llorente's aerial prowess were a force to behold. A combined 35 goals in the league. This team was at its peak, and really, it seemed like the best time to be involved with the club in any capacity whatsoever. Evidently, though, something was bubbling deep below. Where have we heard that before? The 2013-14 Champions League campaign was shockingly brief. Drawn in a seemingly manageable group with Real Madrid, Galatasaray and Copenhagen, Juventus massively underperformed. Only one win in their 6 group matches. In their final, a must-win group match against Galatasaray, a very grindy game, Galatasaray's Wesley Sneijder struck an 85th minute goal that beat Juventus 1-0, knocking the record-breaking Italian champions out at the first hurdle. The team did drop into the Europa League and made a run to the semi-finals, even dreaming of a final, which was set to be hosted in their own stadium. But that dream was dashed by Benfica in the semis. Many had long suspected that Conte's relationship with the Juventus board was deteriorating behind the scenes. His frustrations at not being able to take the team to the next level was further exacerbated when prime transfer targets like Alexis Sanchez and Juan Cuadrado weren't pursued by Agnelli and his board. Talented players like Alvaro Morata and Patrice Evra came in, but these were guys at the start and end of their careers respectively, not refined products, and most significantly, they were cheap. Morata was 20 million euros, Evra was 1 million. Worse yet, at the time, there was a rumor that Juventus were very partial to accepting a reported £40 million bid for Arturo Vidal, one of the squad's centerpieces. Quote, "You cannot go to eat at a €100 restaurant with just €10 in your pocket, can you?" End quote. A now famous quote by Antonio Conte in mid-2014. In case you aren't following, the restaurant is the Champions League. Agnelli, for his part, felt Juventus should be grateful for what Conte had achieved, but was cautious about overreaching, and that philosophical divide led to a breaking point. In the summer of 2014, just as preseason training camp opened, Antonio Conte dropped a bombshell. He resigned as Juventus manager. Within 24 hours, Massimiliano Allegri was appointed, and the rest is history. The separation between Conte and Juve was said to be mutual at the time, but given the circumstances, it's not exactly easy to believe. Something that was made even harder to believe when you consider what happened 7 years later when Conte was managing Inter Milan. After a 0-0 draw in the 2021 Coppa Italia final, the pair got into a war of words and gestures in front of tens of thousands. Conte is shown to flip the bird. Agnelli, according to the internet's greatest lip readers, is believed to have told Conte to shove it up his ass. Doesn't seem like there is much love lost there. As I keep saying, Conte presents himself as a fiery, my way or the highway kind of character. As such, it shouldn't be surprising that he seemingly tends to overreact at times. After all, a year after he left, with no major reinforcements, Allegri won Serie A, the Coppa Italia, and made a Champions League final, only losing out to treble-winning Messi, Suarez, Neymar, Barcelona at the last step. 2 years after that, they did the exact same thing, only beaten in the final by Zidane's unstoppable three-peat Kings of Europe, Madrid. All the same, nobody can deny Conte's brilliance. His career has only gone from strength to strength since this period, proving he can win in damn near any environment. But shifting the focus back to Juventus, under the fiery Italian, Conte's Juventus laid the foundation for what would become a 9-year run of consecutive titles, 2012 through 2020. The first 3 under him, the next 5 under Allegri, and 1 under Sarri. But if you ask me, it seems undeniable that Conte is the genesis of all of this. He is the one that lit the fire that kept burning long after he left. There may have been bumps in the road, but it's undeniable that this team was incredibly special. Antonio Conte's Juventus, an invincible machine resurrected from the dead.